everyone, it's Haley, and today I'm going to be talking about the nearly 50 books that I might finally actually read sometime soon because I can't leave the house anyways. Originally, my thought for this video was I had like 10 books or something like that, but then as I was going around the house to grab the books, I ended up with like 47 or something like that. It's 47 or 48. Every time I looked at my shelves again, I found a new one. I like decimated the downstairs shelves with the classics, and then even here, there are so many books that I have over here. You can see them to the side there. I'm sorry that you can see them, but whatever. I am filming this video in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic for like future viewers who are like, what the hell are you talking about? We have to stay at home, self-isolate and all of that, social distance for our own safety as well as the safety of others. So it's the perfect time to get a lot of reading done, and I thought this was a fun little video idea. Admittedly, a lot of things have changed for me. Like, obviously I have been affected by this whole thing, but my day-to-day life hasn't really been all that affected because I always work from home and I do the majority of stuff that I do. Let's say do one more time. But the point is, I spend a lot of time at home anyways doing what I normally do. Oh my god, stop talking. That's not to say that I don't have a little bit more free time and that my life is completely the same. Obviously it is very different, but I don't have that really big learning adjustment curve that a lot of people who normally work in an office or like go to school or whatever are having now. So I don't have that much more reading time, and to add to that, I have been struggling to read recently because my mind is so consumed by everything that's happening around me. But I actually got a tip from Monica Kim here on YouTube, which is to listen to the audiobook of whatever book you're reading while following along, and that was super helpful. It got me back into the swing of things with reading. I am pre-filming a bunch of videos just in case, so once I'm done with pre-filming, I will have a big block of free time, and once I'm done with edits, I will have a lot of free time. So I should be able to get to some of these books that have been on my TBR for forever. Now, there's kind of a couple of categories here. We've got some sequels here. I have just some big books and some books that I just can't believe I haven't gotten to, but then I also have classics. That probably is like a large portion of this list. Actually, I think there's more modern books on here, but classics are a big part of it. So I'm going to start with those because they're going to be a little bit easier to get through quickly because I'm not going to be giving a synopsis or anything for those. Let's begin, shall we? I don't really know how to begin, but let's do it. So first here I have a pile of fairy tales. I started reading through the Grimm's fairy tales and Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales, but I never ended up finishing. I was actually reading the annotated editions that I have. These are the Barnes & Noble editions, but I also have Fairy Tales from Around the World by Andrew Lang here. Basically, there are so many fairy tales that I'm familiar with and I hear about on a day-to-day basis. I'm obsessed with Disney, so obviously I know a fair amount about fairy tales. However, there's a lot of them that I haven't read the originals, or a lot of them that are kind of obscure and I haven't even heard of. So what better time to catch up on all of them and increase my repertoire of fairy tale knowledge than now? Something that intimidates me quite a bit is Russian authors. They write some big ass books, and I've got two of them here. So both by Leo Tolstoy. We have Anna Karenina, which I think is the one that I super actually want to read this. I'm very intrigued by it. I don't know anything about the plotline for it, but I know there is a retelling that came out recently called Anna K, and Liv over at Stories for Coffee here on YouTube read it and enjoyed it, and her and I tend to have pretty similar tastes with like historical fiction and things like that, and I trust her opinion, so I'm very intrigued by that book. But I also kind of want to read the original Anna Karenina first. It's one of those bucket list books that is just so dang big, but I do want to read it. And also, of course, War and Peace is definitely a bucket list book, but like, oh my god, the font is so small. I feel like I need like a magnifying glass. Like, look at that. The pages are like Bible thin and the font is tiny and the line spacing is tiny. That font has to be like 10-point font, maybe even 9, I don't know. But the book itself is, How many pages are you? 884. But like I said, the font and everything is so small. So this is probably one of the books that I would do audiobook for and maybe follow along as I'm listening to it. But like, I feel like now is the time to get to these chunky Russian novels. We've got all the time in the world. And obviously that's a generalization. I know there are a lot of people who are busier now than ever, especially people who are working on the front lines of this. And thank you so much to them for all their hard work. I'm just kind of like generalizing a little bit here for people who do have more free time, and those who don't, I'm really, really sorry, and thank you for working so hard no matter what you do. I should have said that in the beginning, but I'm kind of all over the place. Next, I have another couple of books that are both by one author, and this is an author that I've actually read before, and it is Charles Dickens. I have read Oliver Twist and A Christmas Carol, but the other two stories of his that intrigue me the most, that I haven't gotten the chance to get to yet, is especially A Tale of Two Cities, because I think that it has to do with the revolution in France. I could be totally wrong about that. I think I'm just kind of getting that from the cover and everything. Like, I've always thought that, so that could just be something that I made up. But the other story is Great Expectations. I can't really tell you why Great Expectations stands out as one that I would like to read, but it does for some reason. I saw that falling and I was kind of trying to save it, but I didn't put in that much effort. Great Expectations is a hefty chonker though, so we'll see. Speaking of hefty chonkers, Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. This is one of my friend's favorite books of all time. I've never seen the movie, haven't read the book or anything, and I do want to see the movie, but she has said that I have to read the book first, which I do agree with. It's just, is so big. This one at least does have bigger font. I'm just one of those people who doesn't generally like big books, which is why I have so many big books in here, because I'm like, I could have read so many books in the time it took me to read this one book, and I would rather consume more stories than have one big long story. That's just my personal preference as a reader, but I'm not too familiar with this story at all. I know very little about it, and I do trust her opinions, so I should read it, and hopefully I will try to. Next is something that's kind of comical to be on this list, because this has been on my yearly TBRs for probably since I started BookTube. And if you've been watching me for a while, then you know that, and you know what book is coming. It's The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I've met Margaret Atwood, okay? This is like a personalized signed copy of this book. And I'm Canadian and very proud of it, and I haven't read this book. So I feel like a terrible Canadian. I know my sister read it, really loved it, and obviously there's so many people out there who love it. I am a little bit familiar with the story. I know it's a dystopia and it has a lot to do with feminism, I believe. I haven't seen the TV show yet because I wanted to read it first, and what better time than now? Honestly, if I don't read this before quarantine and everything is up, oh, shame on me. Next I have The Complete Shakespeare. I feel like now is a good time to catch up on the Shakespeare plays that I haven't gotten the chance to read yet. And I would actually listen to the audio for those because I like to listen to audios of the plays. I feel like it just kind of makes sense, but there are quite a few I haven't gotten to. I've never had any of the histories. I have never read, there's a few of the comedies. The comedies are my favorite, so I think that might be where I begin, but there are quite a few that I haven't consumed yet. I don't want to say read because I'm not going to read them, but you know what I mean. This also is the Usborne edition that has just stories from all the plays, but I would actually like listen to the real plays, but this has like really pretty illustrations, so I like it. I'm an intellectual. Next up are three books that, quite frankly, it's kind of ridiculous that I haven't read yet, and that is these three books by Jane Austen. So we have Emma, which I especially want to read because the movie is available for renting, I think. I don't know. I know they released it early, so I would like to watch that, but I want to read the book first. And then we have Mansfield Park and Persuasion. These are the last three Jane Austen novels that I have yet to read, and it's the perfect time for Jane Austen because she writes some fun and upbeat, and they're really satirical stories that I think would help me to escape from all that's going on around me. Next, I have a couple of children's classics. So I have read quite a few children's classics, but there are still ones that are on my bucket list, and these two are kind of near the top. One is Pippi Longstockings by Astrid Lindgren. It's just one Pippi Longstocking. It's not two. Gosh, Haley. Admittedly, I hated Pippi Longstocking, the movie, or was it a movie or a TV show? I don't know, but I didn't like it as a kid. But I also didn't like Anne of Green Gables as a kid, and when I read Anne of Green Gables when I was older, I fell in love with it, and it's one of my favorite books of all time now. So might be a similar situation here. And there's also The Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling. This is a story that I'm a little bit more familiar with, and it is one that I like a lot. I have yet to see the live action one, so maybe I'll read this and then watch the live action remake that Disney did. And finally, as far as classics go, is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I don't really know much of what this classic is about either, but I've had this one forever, and I think that it is time that I add it to my Bronte reading repertoire. All right, and now let's get to the rest of this. Where do I even begin? I don't know. Let's just pick up a random book. So, Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. I have tried to read this book a couple of times, and I think now is the time for me to try again, and if it doesn't work, I'm gonna finally unhaul it and give up on it. It's a story that I want to love, and I know a lot of you guys say that you would love it and that you think I would love it, but every time I've tried to read it physically or I've tried to listen to the audiobook, I've just been a little bit underwhelmed by it. But maybe it's the time that I've been trying to read it, so I'll give it one last go and see where I end up. Along that same note is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. This is a book that honestly I feel like I would love. I feel like I should love it, and I think that I will. It's just every time I try and sit down to read it, something happens. The first time I was traveling to England and I just got distracted by traveling, obviously. The second time, I don't even know what happened, but then this last time was when everything started going, like, it was crazy. So I was like, I can't read this anymore. I need something a little bit lighter and easier to consume, so I ended up putting it down. But I want to know why people love this series so much. I have read Skyward by Brandon Sanderson and enjoyed it thoroughly, so why wouldn't I love this one? This seems to be the favorite of everyone, so I want to know why. I have so many freaking books here. I'm getting so overwhelmed. But next are the 3 Twisted Tales books that I have. I talked about doing a little Disney themed readathon, and maybe I'll do that while I'm stuck at home. I can do that, but I have 3 here, soon to be 4 actually. There's one that's on the way, but I have Straight On Till Morning by Liz Braswell, which is Peter Pan, and then Part of Your World by Liz Braswell, which is, I always want to call it Ariel, but it's The Little Mermaid. And then finally Mirror Mirror by Jen Kalanita, which is Snow White, of course. So these are all by Disney, and they are just reimaginings that are kind of answering a question. Like we have What If the Evil Queen Poisoned the Prince instead, and they're just twisting the tale. What? Wild. I think that reading these and having a little Disney movie marathon too could be fun, so maybe that'll be something that I'll do. I have a bunch of sequels here, and I kind of wanted to get to those all at once, so I think I'm gonna go through and pick them out. So the next little bit is going to be sequels, because we all know I have so many that I haven't gotten the chance to read yet. The Beauty of Darkness by Mary E. Pearson is for sure one that I want to get to. This is the final book of the Kiss of Deception trilogy, and I would have to reread the second book, but I thoroughly enjoy Mary E. Pearson's writing, so I feel like this would be a good pick to go with. It's just, once again, it's so big and big books scare me. Speaking of Mary E. Pearson, it's not a sequel, but a companion to that series, and that is Dance of Thieves. I was going to unhaul this, but when I was looking at the reviews, it has very good reviews, and since she is an author that I've read a couple of books by her and enjoyed them both thoroughly, I think it is one that I want to keep and give a chance eventually. Of course, there's also The Wicked King by h.leblanc. This is the next book of the Cruel Prince series, and I did include this on a monthly TBR, so it should be one that I'll hopefully get to soon, but I also have The Queen of Nothing, so since I have more than one of the sequels, it's time. I also have A Reaper at the Gates by Saba Tahir. I read A Torch Against the Night, but this is once again a situation where I would have to reread that second one, which I'm totally okay with, but I think that utilizing this time to get caught up is going to be perfect, because the final book of this quartet, I think there's 4, isn't there? Yeah, I have 3 here, so obviously if the last one's coming out, there's 4. Oh my god, math is so hard. Why am I so stupid? Anyways, I just never have really felt the urge to pick this up, even though I did enjoy the previous books a lot, and it is an interesting world to be in. It's sort of inspired by ancient Rome. It's a very intense and brutal world, but it did give me nightmares, so maybe it's not the time, but I think it also is. Does this video make any sense to anyone who's not me? Probably not, but we're still going. Next is the next 2 books of the Charlotte Holmes series. these would definitely be quick and easy, fun reads. There's one more book I think that I don't have from these. I was waiting for the paperbacks to come out for all of them, but it doesn't say how many books or what is next. Oh yes, it does. A Question of Homes is the final one, I think, but that's the only one that I don't have. So A Study in Charlotte is the first book, and I liked that a lot. It is a gender-bent Sherlock Holmes retelling, super fun, set at a boarding school. That's always a great setting, so why not read the other two that I have? This is probably like the most shocking book on here that I haven't read yet because it's been out for a hot second. And like, I love the series, but it started so long ago and there's so many books for it. It's Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J Maas. I haven't freaking read this book yet, and I have Crescent City and I want to read Crescent City, but I'm also like, I kind of feel guilty reading Crescent City before I even finish the Throne of Glass series, which I was so highly anticipating the ending of, but then it took so long to get here that I kind of was like meh about it. And once again, I think I'm gonna have to reread. I'm at least gonna have to recap myself on the other ones, but I think Tower of Dawn I'll reread before going into this one. But definitely gonna have to read some recaps, and this is just, we have Bible pages again, and it's 984 freaking pages. I just, I hate my fear of big books, but it's a thing, okay? Next is The Crown's Fate by Evelyn Skye. I read The Crown's Game a while ago and I loved it. It's a magical competition. It's these two characters are competing to be the Tsar's magician, and I thought that was such a fun concept, and the execution was also a lot of fun. I enjoyed the setting. It was just a great all-around read, and it surprised me. That's like the best part. I love when it's a book that I haven't heard a lot about and then I end up enjoying it so much. So it's been a long time since I've read that first book, and I've had the sequel for a long time too, but I think it is an excellent world that I would love to be back in. I'm sure you knew this one was going to show up on this list eventually, but it is the next two books in actually the final two books of the Queen of Blood series. What's it actually called? The Queens of Renthia. That's the series title. But The Reluctant Queen is the second book, and The Queen of Sorrow is the third book. They have a beautiful natural world with all these spirits, and each book follows a different queen, which is a cool addition. And I did really like the first book, but the second and the third have been sitting on my TBR for so dang long that I need to get caught up. Like I mentioned, I really enjoyed Skyward by Brandon Sanderson, so getting to the sequel, I feel like it's the time to do it. This admittedly hasn't been on my TBR for a long time because it is a fairly recent release, but it's called Starsight, by the way, I never said that. But since I do have a terrible habit of putting off sequels for so long, I would like to try and prevent that from happening. And finally, I think I went through the piles and I think I found them all, but the final sequel that I have is Finale, which is the finale to the Karvall trilogy. I really enjoyed books 1 and 2. It's a fun world to escape into, which is kind of perfect for right now. It's circusy and mystery and just all of that stuff, and I love the sister relationship as well, and I am interested to see how the whole series is going to end, so time to read the finale. I don't know why I did it like that, but yeah. Moving on. I actually have one more sequel. It's on the bottom here. Oh dang. Oh dang. It is Winter of the World by Ken Follett. I have actually read this before, admittedly, but I listened to the audiobook for it and I would like to actually physically read it. It's a brick. Like if any of the other books I showed you were big, like this one's super big. How many pages? 940. I guess it is smaller than Kingdom of Ash at least, but this is the second book of the Century Trilogy, which is such an inventive idea. So the first book follows the first generation of this family through World War I, and then you follow the next generation in this book, and then the final book of the trilogy is following the next generation. So you just follow the different generations of a bunch of different families all over the world during the war. Like every facet of each of the wars is covered. Oh, it's just so cool. And I love the first book so much, and I don't really remember this one, which is why I would like to read it again. I probably should have narrowed down this list a little bit more before I started filming, but I was just like, no, I have to include this one. I have to include this one. I have to include this one. And lo and behold, here we are. So next is Graceling by Kirsten Kershaw. I have all 3 books to this trilogy. It's more of a companion trilogy, but they are romantic fantasies, and I actually almost unhauled this. So I think that I need to actually read it so then I can justify my not unhauling it. Next is Wicked Like a Wildfire by Lana Popovich. I've included this on so many TBRs because basically the reason that I keep it is it has one of my favorite book covers of all time. I think it's beautiful, but also the concept does sound fun. It's like a low fantasy sort of thing. I have started it before, but I've never actually given myself the chance to get into the meat of the story and see if it has been worth keeping on my TBR for all of these years. Next is kind of a similar situation to Carry On, and that is Aurora Rising by Amie Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This author duo wrote Illuminate, which is one of my favorite trilogies, but I've tried to get into this book before. I've tried the audiobook, I've tried physically reading it, and it just hasn't done it for me yet, but since I love them so much, I'm hesitant to give up on it so easily. I think having a bit more time though to focus on it might help out a little bit because there are a lot of people who actually loved this book as well, and I don't know what I'm like not seeing with it, but I think I want to give it one last chance. Another one last chancer is The Light Between Worlds by Laura E. Weymouth. This is a book that I love the concept for, and I have tried to read it a couple of times, and I've hung on to it because I love that concept so much. I think it's one that I'm going to try the audiobook because there are some excerpts that are completely in italics, and I find that a little bit difficult and irritating to actually physically read, but I think this is a good time to read it too. I don't know why. I guess because it's about characters. It's kind of Narnia-esque. So these characters go to a world that's called the Woodlands, and then they come back to London during World War II, and it's adjusting to life after having been to this fantastical world. They're like, well, what now? So I think there will be a certain element of escapism here that might help out a little bit. Next is The Sky Without Stars by Jessica Brody and Joanne Rendell. Jessica Brody is an author. I've read a couple of her books before. The only books that I've read by her before are contemporaries because I think that's all she's ever written before, but I'm not entirely sure about that. This, however, is, I think, a Les Mis retelling, but it's set in space, and I love the concept of that, and I was super excited for it to come out, but I didn't ever read it. I don't know why I keep opening the books and like holding them here like this, like I'm gonna start reading them now. It's a really weird thing that I'm just gonna stop right now. Next is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. Leigh Bardugo is one of my absolute favorite authors of all time. This is her first venture into adult, and I started trying to read it before Christmas, but I was listening to the audiobook and I don't know, I had mixed feelings on it, but it's definitely one that I want to give another shot. I just got distracted by other things, so I think this is another one where once I have the time to actually focus on it, I should read it. Next is Brazen by Catherine Longshore. I also have Guilt on here. I have Tarnished, but that's at my parents' house, so I won't be reading that one anytime soon. But these are Tudor era historical fictions, and I've been super into historical fiction recently, actually, so it might finally be the time because I've had them for so long. Next is The Fountains of Silence by Rudis Pettis, another historical fiction, though this one is set in Spain after the Spanish Civil War, but this is one of my favorite historical fiction authors. So the fact that I haven't read this yet is really weird, especially since I had an arc of it before it even came out. So it hasn't been out for that long, but because I've had an arc, I've had so much time to read it, almost a year now, and I haven't done it yet. Oh, I just hate myself sometimes for doing that. Like, it's like, why do I just withhold these things from myself? Next is Leviathan by Scott Westerfeld. I have owned this book twice because I owned it and then I unhauled it and then I repurchased it. It is a World War I historical fiction, but Scott Westerfeld is the author of the Ugly series that I loved as a kid. Like, I loved that one growing up. But this is so inventive and unique. It's steampunk and it has these illustrations of the different things that they're using. Oh, so cool. So why have I put it off for forever? Who knows? Next is Uprooted by Naomi Novik. A lot of people are surprised I haven't read this book before whenever I mention it. So many people say that it seems like something that I would love. So I think that's why. I don't fully know what it's about. I thought it was a fairy tale retelling, but I think it's just kind of like a fantasy, sort of fairy tale-esque fantasy. But Spinning Silver has a beautiful cover too, and these both have beautiful covers, so I'm kind of hoping I like it, like partially just because of the beautiful covers. Next is Timekeeper by Tara Sim, another historical fiction. I don't know when I started putting off historical fiction. Actually, part of it is because I got into the really bad habit of saving all my historical fictions for winter and fall, but then I would never actually get to them because I wouldn't be in the mood for them. But I do generally read those around that time of year, but sometimes I'm not really in the mood for it. But then I'd be like, when I was in the mood, like in the summer, I'd be like, nope, we have to save it, but no more. It is spring and technically the weather disagrees, but I am finally in the mood for historical fiction. I hadn't realized how much I missed it, so I'm going to take advantage of that. This is a Victorian era historical fiction, I believe, and it has to do with clocks, so that sounds cool. Yes, it is Victorian. I wasn't sure if it was Edwardian or Victorian, but it's an alternate Victorian world controlled by clock towers, where a damaged clock can fracture time and a destroyed one can stop it completely. It's about a mechanic. Ooh, cool. I have one last historical fiction on here. I have such a pile of books in front of me that I literally don't even have anywhere to stand anymore. I need to, like, why did I throw them all directly in front of me? That was dumb. Anyways, The Librarian of Auschwitz by Antonio Iturbe, translated by Lilith Thwaites, is the final one that I have. I know this is going to be a very emotionally heavy story, but I think it will be impactful and beautiful, and that's kind of something that I'm looking for right now. Next is Call Down the Hawk by Maggie Stiefvater. This is the first book in a Ronan-centered trilogy. Ronan is one of the characters from the Raven Cycle Quartet, which is one of my favorite series, and I remember so highly anticipating this trilogy when it was first announced, and then I feel like once it came out, I haven't really heard anything about whether it was good or bad, and not that like I'm going off of what other people say, but I think that kind of just made me forget about it. And it did come out right before Christmas, so that kind of had something to do with it, but since I've got a lot of time on my hands now, why not? And finally is The Last Magician by Lisa Maxwell. This is a book that, once again, I unhauled and then I repurchased, so I want to see if it was worth it. I repurchased it because Hannah loved it so much, and it is kind of like time-traveling New York sort of thing. She said you would probably like it if you like the Diviners, so that sounds great to me. I love the Diviners. I did try to read it though at one point before I unhauled it, and I think maybe I just wasn't in the mood for it, so it's time to give it a second chance. Okay, wow. That was a lot. This was longer than I expected, and I have so many books in front of me, but those are the books that maybe possibly I will finally get to since I can't leave the house. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm definitely not going to get to all of these, but I think if I even get to one of these, I will feel super proud of myself, especially just considering how my reading year has been going. I think that would be a great accomplishment. But please do let me know what you guys are planning on reading while you are stuck inside. I would love to know what all of you are up to, and just remember, if you're having trouble focusing on reading or it's not really something you want to do right now, that's totally okay too. Just take it easy, be patient. This isn't an easy time for anyone, so we all just need to be patient with ourselves as well as with each other. But please do make sure that you are staying home if you are able to, and that you are social distancing as much as you possibly can. I hope you are all staying safe and healthy, and I will see you guys in a new video very, very soon. Bye!